Call the meeting to order. We have all council members in attendance except for Bruce Stallman, who I'm sure is on his way. Just texted him, so he will be here momentarily. We'll announce when he gets here. And City Manager Penny has some, there's Mr. Stallman, has some housekeeping to go over real quickly.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out it's a little confusing because we're going to be jumping back and forth between rooms tonight. And so we're going to start in here. We're going to end by 5 o'clock on the Council University. Charlie Bloston is going to make his presentation on the 2012 capital construction. And I've advised the Mayor if we can end by 5:45, so that'll give time to take some of our stuff off the table, and then our elected guests will be joining us. And then we will quickly go into the council chambers, and then we will, as soon as we're done there, we will come back here and finish the Council University. And then, because that's not enough movement for you all, is we will adjourn to if the council votes to do so, to an executive session in our normal room next door. So please bear with us on moving back and forth. That's all I had on the housekeeping, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's first, since we're talking about the agenda, are there any changes to the agenda? Yes.
We are not prepared for consent agenda item A, approval of the Stern Lake dredging. We've got some additional staff work to do, so I would ask that that item be removed. We will return to you once we're prepared for that. So the only action item this evening would be the public hearing and the second reading of the ordinance for the budget.
Okay.
Don't we want to say that when we get to that?
The Mayor will. I just let you guys know.
Okay.
She will make that statement.
Okay, so we are at Council University. We want to finalize the protocols and standards of conduct. Which pile did I pick up? Okay.
I have
Michael?
So 5D, under Council Boards and City Employee Communication, paragraph D, Council had asked for some, the request had been that any email from a council member, the response was sent to all. And so the new language states, Council can expect that answers will be disseminated to all Council board members, Council/board members. And so I think it was Councilman Taylor that had made that request. So if that meets your intent, Councilman, yes, that is what we have proposed back to you.
Any discussion on that? Council, I have a concern with this particular piece. I am concerned about the amount of information that'll be coming and the value of that information. I would like to see us go more back to where we were with having it be related specifically to policy, as opposed to any communication back and forth between council and staff. I just feel as though it's going to become overwhelming, the amount of emails that can be going back and forth depending on what might be happening out there. Jim?
Well, it may be, but I think time will tell. I'd like to have us do a trial period with this and see how it goes. A period of maybe 90 days, that's a quarter of the year. And I think it's unfair to do it 30 days because during the holidays I don't think you get as much activity going back and forth. And so doing a trial period and then make a decision at that time whether we want to continue that or not. As I said before, you can hit the delete button pretty easily. I mean, if you think it's a subject you're not interested at all in, knowing what the answer is that comes back from staff, delete it. I really don't care, but I do think we ought to at least give this a try and see what happens.
Any discussion on that?
Just to kind of review what we're talking about, which is our inquiries go, in this instance, may go direct to staff with a copy to Michael, as an example. Response comes back, at least in our trial period, goes back to entire council. If we have a further clarification or request, that then goes back to staff, not copying all council. It's going to go back to staff with the response coming back.
Correct.
To all council. Michael?
And I actually think, if I can expand on Councilman Taylor's, that it's probably worthy of coming back and discussing the protocols and how they've actually worked for you. I mean, part of what we had talked about, well, what council had talked about in some depth was this idea of the politicking outside and the vote getting and those kind of things. And so it's probably worthy of coming back with the entire document, just again, kind of expanding on Jim's idea and saying, you know, what is what we intended to be being. And not just this one in particular. I fully concur, because my hope is that you will eventually learn, if you'll allow me, to trust the staff that we will respond to all in an appropriate fashion for those things that are policy related. I totally understand, Jim, why you're asking for it, but just broadening that up and bringing it back, we're going to just do a quick run through and say, is there anything that you guys have experienced over this last quarter that you think you want to add in there, take away, clarify, et cetera?
I like the idea of a kind of a trial period, because I think that will also give staff ample time with it to determine how it's impacting them. And we'll also get an opportunity to see over 3 months if there really is an issue,
Right.
or if there is not. So is everybody okay with, as Michael said, we'll revisit this again, but putting like a 90-day on this one, so we can, any problems with that? Okay, so,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll put it on the calendar for a quarter from now.
okay.
And then on paragraph 9, council, board, and commission conduct with the public, paragraph C, during the council discussion, council modified during that meeting on that, and then asked us to try to do something that clarified it a little bit. And so what we've proposed is, if necessary, public comments received during a public meeting will be followed up by staff at a later time, or as directed by the council or board. So the if necessary component will be the decision by the staff saying, do we feel that it was requested by the speaker, or was it just a statement to the council, et cetera. So again, a level of trust that we will make that determination, and then you, as the council, always retain, of course, the authority to say, we want a response to that citizen. So that's the or in there. So I think we'll cover both.
But I think at the same time that a question could come from the public, that a staff member sitting there knows the immediate answer instead of waiting to
Yep.
do it. You know, they can signal like this, and somebody,
Yep.
the mayor or somebody will notice that they're doing that and get that answer right then.
Yeah.
That's a much more efficient and proficient way to do it.
And I think, as we've discussed previously, this is not intended to preclude that. It's about the baseline
Right.
assumption, which is that would not occur unless the staff member, the department head, fully knows that they can respond in that quick,
Right.
you know, this is how many lane miles we have in the city. If public services can answer that question. But as we discussed before, I don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're responding without actually having reviewed the question in its entirety. So yes, if we can do it, it would always be the intent to let everyone know immediately, but not anticipate. So,
Okay.
good? And
That's it.
Yep, that was it. We got
Peggy?
Yes, I have an item on D in that same section.
Tell me what page you're on.
In that same section, D, honesty.
Page 11.
Okay, all right. Gotcha.
I'm,
11D.
pardon?
Yep, I'm sorry. I'm just-
Number 2 says, I am prepared to make decisions for the best interest of the public, whether those decisions are popular or not. That does not seem to me to be an honesty issue. I'm not sure if we want it in there or not, but then related to that, I have several other, a couple of other questions. If if we have that any place in here, then I'm wondering, what is the role of council members who are elected to represent the citizens? If the citizens say, no, we don't want to have a Santa Claus, but and the council thinks it's in the best interest of the public to have a Santa Claus. Now, I'm using a silly example, but there seems to be a conflict, particularly if we consider what our duties are as stipulated in charter. So I don't know that we want to have that statement anywhere in here, but it certainly is not an honesty issue, I think.
Comments? Jim?
I guess I just don't see it being a major problem.
But do you see it as an honesty issue?
Well, I think people would interpret that in maybe different manners.
Being prepared to make decisions for people think that's
Well,
a preparation issue. It's not an honesty issue.
So would you move that statement someplace else?
Well, if the rest of council wants to keep it, I think it definitely needs to be moved.
I like the statement.
Okay, geez. Now, you guys can't sit next to each other.
Paper, scissors, go.
Okay, Bruce Stallman.
To me, it's honesty/integrity, or just change honesty to integrity. I mean, I think the concept is fine. The title heading, generally speaking, should be broad enough to capture a lot of this stuff.
That would have been my comment, to just change honesty to integrity, and it would be a broader net to encompass those statements.
Everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Nope.
Okay. Show of hands. Okay? Okay. Change it. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, with that final change, that looks like we're good on that. All right. So, moving to the amended legislative rules. And in my packet, I have this. Is this something we need to go over?
It is not.
Okay.
That was the original one. So you guys had the
All right.
travel policy.
Proposed legislative rules. A couple of things, Council. One, I think if we can run through the edits and make sure everything we asked last time got incorporated. And then there was, Peggy had her rules, and I think Peggy and Kirsten have spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth on these. I'd like for Kirsten to give us a synopsis of, if you can, of what the substantive differences are. I mean, I don't expect that we need to go through any of it line by line, but look more on the big picture and see if there's stuff that's dropped through that we need to integrate, or if we're good, or what.
Okay. Well, after some discussion today with Councilmember Cole, I think I may be putting words in your mouth, but it seems like you are in agreement with the document that we worked on last time, and maybe you have a few areas that you want to propose, because I did go through Councilmember Cole's proposed document, and some of the things that we were attempting to do, such as taking out charter provisions or interpretation of charter provisions in law, are still in there. So I think that you're okay with the way we headed with this, but you had a few that you felt strongly you wanted to cover. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
Can we just go through and then take them
Yeah.
as
Where they come in.
That's probably
We
the
do it
best
that way.
way to do
All right. Michael or
Actually,
Kirsten?
do you want to walk us through on this, Kirsten?
So We took the first suggestion is that we wanted to refer to the mayor in the appropriate way that the charter presents, and that's president of council, but because there's a common reference to mayor throughout after the first call out, we refer to the mayor as the mayor, or the president of council as the mayor. I did take the liberty of putting in this provision in subsection B under rules of order, where we reference the mayor here in this document will be the chair or the presiding officer of other boards and commissions, because it is our intention that this document will control boards and commissions to the extent it conflicts with anything they have adopted. Go ahead.
And I like that idea, but I think it needs to go one step further in that when it references in this document to council, shall refer to the members of the board, commission, or committee. Because we talk a lot about council going to do this, council do that, or council has this kind of prerogative to do. And I think that if you put the references to mayor being the presiding officer of the meeting, then references to council should also be identified there as members of the board, commission, or committee.
And I agree with you. I think at some point I did identify where it was something that would govern the boards and commissions, and so I called out in those sections boards and commissions, but I'll go back and make sure, because I agree with you on that, if everyone else agrees. So moving on to council meetings, we changed the notification 32 hours instead of 48.
Where are you? Oh.
I moved on to council meetings.
Okay.
Big print, page 2.
Kirsten, you may want to just number the major headings,
Okay.
so 2B or whatever is easier to
Okay.
find.
Okay, so it'll be a new section, Roman 2, council meetings, and subsection B, special meetings. We changed the time for notice from 48 hours to 32.
So I have a question of procedure here. So are we going to comment on the sections that Kirsten talks about now, or are we going to save all our comments?
No, I think you-
I mean, if there's something else we think should be added?
I would say while we're in the general vicinity, if
Oh,
you have
okay.
something,
Okay.
Peggy.
So in the special meetings, and I'll call attention to this elsewhere too, we need to post for the public notice of meetings too. Now, we could have a global statement somewhere about posting notices, and we wouldn't then have to have one at each place, but I'll call out the places where I think.
We have a notice requirement anyway, so I don't think you need to say it anywhere, because that's required by law. It's stated for the meetings in state statute what the requirements for posting are.
Okay, so then let's pause here on another issue. I personally see this document as something the citizens should have access to also. And so I just assumed the citizens didn't have to try to go and look at all the state laws and other laws and whatever on things. So it would seem to me having some redundancy in this would be helpful to them, so they understand the way when and how we post notices. I mean, that would be my view. It still amazes me sometimes people ask me, well, geez, I didn't know that you all were supposed to do that, or that you do that, or the law requires it, or whatever. So I just see this as one of those ways of educating people who might themselves want to consider running for council and know what the rules are we have to play by.
Solomon and then Beckman.
Oh, I went first last time.
Oh, okay.
In support of what Peggy's suggesting, would it be helpful to have at the beginning a references section that mentions that we have guidance in other places, and then to make the statement that guidance is in those other places for the meetings? and then the public would know to look other places, and I would assume that we would have access to them or a link to them on the webpage, or maybe even right there with what they're looking at.
Well, my hesitancy for doing that is because we can't get everything in here. And so and that was some of the concern with having portions of the charter in here, because there are times when you need to look at the whole document, the whole charter. And so if we have the notice provision, which is governed by state statutory law, but we don't have other things that govern open meetings, I think it can be misleading. So that's why we were trying to narrow this down to, this is what governs your operation at the meeting, and not mislead the public into thinking that this covers all open meetings laws.
And I was going to say, I think that there's probably if you have questions, kind of a preamble that's not associated with how the council blesses this, but the cover page, if you will, that staff puts on this, that says, if you have questions, call the city clerk for it, because I concur. I think the danger here is it changes. There's exceptions to rules, and I will continue to respectfully. I don't think a lot of people are going to be looking at this, and they're not going to come and find this document on their how to understand the process. They're going to ask you, or they're going to call the city clerk, and we run afoul of not being inclusive of everything again. So it's a decision for the council how you want to operate it. I absolutely understand it and concur with Councilman Cole's concern about education of the public. I just think that there is a better way to do that. This document is not intended to be that education piece. This is, as Kirsten mentioned, this is the legislative rules by which you govern yourselves. And we'll be having this conversation again in 2 years, and then we'll have it again in 2 years. And so it's a flowing document in that sense. And to some extent, there's a responsibility for the citizen to do some footwork and some legwork. There is a level of responsibility.
Bruce?
Yeah, somewhat similar to what Bruce said. Maybe the issue is just putting a disclaimer at the front of each document. Maybe that's what this cover letter is going to do, which is basically, hey, this is a narrow construction, and there are code, charter, open records laws, state laws, open meeting laws, so forth and so on, that need to be acknowledged and understood, and we can't represent all of that in this particular space.
And just so you council's aware, I think that is fairly common language. Anytime you, even on the web, if you access the ordinances on the web, it will have a disclaimer on there. Basically, if there was an error or omission in the creation of that web page, this is not a substitute to go finding legal advice and that type of thing. And we can definitely, anything that we put on the web, we can make it much more user-friendly in here's where you get additional information, the links to state statute, those other things that are more generic in nature that allow those avenues for the general public, or even you or us as staff to find the information we need.
Okay. So, is everybody okay with that, with the exclusion of that, but including it in a cover? Okay. Peggy?
Yeah. Can I, before I forget one, because I already talked to Kirsten about this, but someplace in this document, and Kirsten would look to see where, I think we need to add the function, purpose, whatever, of the consent agenda. And so, since I won't see a little note as we go through, I wanted to get that in, and explain the reasons why a council member pulls an item from the consent agenda. For example, to ask questions, correct something, amend something, move to postpone the item or whatever. And I will just tell you that someone said to me, asked me a couple of days ago, what's the purpose of the consent agenda? And I won't tell you who, but it totally surprised me who asked me that. And said, I've been wondering, long time, what was the purpose? So since we mentioned consent agenda, I think it's good to explain the why, so that even council members know, because I didn't understand that certainly when I was first elected.
If I can add to that, I think the person Peggy's talking about was a tall, dark, handsome person. We won't name, but they're wise, obviously. I agree with Peggy on that. I think that would just be a clarification of no, Phil has, no. I think it would be good for clarification of process for at least the new council members coming in.
I mean, just my thought on consent agenda, which, I mean, there is a preamble that goes along with the consent agenda each time. And I don't know if there's ways to put some clarification in that, but it basically says we're going to try and expedite our meeting by having non-controversial items dealt with relatively expeditiously. I mean, that's really what it's designed to do, and any member can pull it for pretty much whatever reason. So,
Yeah, that's on the agendas.
Yeah,
it's read every time.
What I'd like myself is to have that statement in here, and then just to add the piece that these are the kinds of things people typically pull something for. It's just an ease kind of thing. But
And as someone who's been out there watching these meetings for many years, the consent agenda portion happens so quick that you don't know what hit you. So I think if it was in here, it would just be a helpful thing.
I guess my question is, where would it go in here? And my other question is it a definition or is it a legislative rule and procedure that we want to put in here? Because just trying to keep this more pure on legislative rules and procedures, if it is a definition, is there a better place to define it? Because I tend to agree that I don't think that we're going to get the citizens reading this in flocks. I think, I'm not saying there won't be interest in some that will, but if we're trying to keep it as pure and simple and topic-oriented as we are, what's the best way to do it? What's the best way to get that information out? Because it is good information. Kirsten.
Go ahead. Do you
Or
agree?
Michael.
So we have it currently in our agendas, but I mean, we can cover it in here, I think.
Well,
Do you-
I was going to actually, if jumping in, this idea of having the citizen pamphlet seems to me that that's where this would go, because when you're talking about, because in there we have to define what a quasi-judicial action is, because that will have, that's a more formal, you've got your 3 minutes and then consent agenda. So it's almost a council meeting 101 document in there. And so if you're comfortable with it, I think that's probably the place, because those definitions really are for the citizenry, not for you all. And so I think we could incorporate it in that. And I've just been brainstorming like crazy since last week on this thing. I think it'll be a great document.
Yeah, I think it's
That'd be a good place.
well,
okay.
I'll probably be the only one that disagrees. What is this document for, if not in part for brand-new council people to be able to look at and understand something, as well as a reference, because some things don't occur too often. So it seems to me it would be very, very easy to slip it in as an asterisk, if nothing else, under order of agenda that lists the items that are on there to clarify what consent agenda is. And to let new council people understand what kinds of things they can do when they get, if they want to pull, and what the word pull means, or just to say pull, and what the purpose is. But that's still there.
Okay, let's show of hands who want to include it in the document. 3. Opposed? 4. But if we all agree to put it in.
The citizens
the
go.
citizens. Jim?
Are we still on the council meeting section?
Yes.
Are we ready to go to emergency meetings? See, the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3?
Yes.
I have some suggestions on the top of page 3, where it talks about the end of that line, special. I think that word needs to be emergency. Third line down, where the word special, I think needs to be struck. So we are talking about emergency. which is the next word. And down about the 6th or 7th line, the word special also, I think, needs to be emergency, since this is the paragraph dealing with emergency meetings and not special meetings.
Okay,
Okay.
that works.
Everybody okay? All right?
Yeah.
And then going on down to the next one in number D, under study sessions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down, the first word is coincide with regular. I think we need to insert or special meetings of the council. So it would read, such study sessions may coincide with regular or special meetings of city council.
Okay.
Everybody okay?
That is,
Okay. Kirsten?
So are we into E in that subsection? It'll be Roman II, council meetings, notice of canceling a meeting.
I have one more, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was talking to Marley.
Sure.
On page 4, item number H, on the adoption of the agenda, the second sentence there, beginning any items not appearing on the approved agenda, my preference would be to strike that entire sentence. Because once somebody proposes an addition to the agenda, the body should be able to determine where the item is going to be placed for adoption or for action. So having that sentence in there, I think just confuses things. That once we adopt the agenda and we're adding things to it at that time, then we determine where on the agenda that is going to go. And if we decide it's going to go to the end for consideration, that's great. If we decide it's going to go into new business, that's fine. If we decide it's something that's old business that we brought up, that would be great too. But we put it in its proper place, and it may or may not be at the end of the meeting.
Jim, just to kind of make sure I'm clear on that, which I agree it should go in a logical location. Are you looking for the president of the council to place that, or are you looking for the body to make those decisions?
Well, I think whoever's making the proposal addition to the agenda would probably say, I think this should go under new business, or I think this should go under old business, or general business, or whatever. You know, we and then the body can say yay or nay, I suppose, if you need to do that. But normally what the president of the council does is if somebody makes a suggestion, they want to put an item onto the agenda, an addition, the president usually just accepts where that person wants to put it. That's the way we have been doing practice. And I just don't see any need to having that second sentence in there.
Okay, because you're saying the first sentence covers the
what
body
we-
can make a vote on it, however it goes.
If we need to, or the president just says, this is where we're going to go. The mayor says we're going to go.
Kirsten?
Well, you did discuss that at great length last time, I don't know if you recall, and you then ultimately decided to keep it in case there was something that got missed when you were making changes to the agenda in the beginning. So I'm not tied to it, but it is a nice housekeeping thing to have in case there are leftover items.
Okay, let's, any more discussion? Just do a show of hands to keep it in. Take it out. Goes.
Can we back up to something on the bottom of page 3? E.
Yes.
The notice of canceling a meeting of city council shall be posted and given to the members not less than 24 hours before the time fixed for the meeting. We modified this last time to talk about a 32-hour notice of posting a meeting. So it seems to me the same time should apply here. So
this provision is not a provision covered in state law, so that's why we thought it was good to have something in here. And you discussed it last time. I think Wendy was of the opinion that 24 hours would be something practical and reasonable for her, but there is no legal requirement either way.
discussion?
I recognize that there was a difference between the 32 and the 24, where we talk about it in one paragraph at 32, and the next paragraph, or one or two down, it becomes 24.
Because we had changed the 48 to 32.
Right, so it becomes a work day.
Yeah. So it seemed to me just be consistent there, because it'd be one fewer thing to have to keep track of.
It doesn't make a difference. 32 is fine with me, I don't care. That's like a 10 o'clock on a Monday morning before the Tuesday night meeting.
I guess my only concern would be if we cancel something short notice, then 24-hour notice is probably what should be our minimum. Strive for better than that, but I think if it says not less than 24 hours, kind of covers, but if we're going to cancel a meeting, we don't know for what reason we may have to cancel it, and it may be a last minute that, and then we're not breaking our own rules.
Right, and that's the discussion that we had with the clerk's office, since they have to do the publication and meet those requirements.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Show of hands if you're okay with keeping it at not less than 24. Okay.
Okay, so does anyone have anything else? We kind of skipped through some of the stuff on study sessions, but we loosened that up. There's nothing in the charter that mandates the study session. That's a useful tool that we want to incorporate, but we wanted to keep it with the May terminology because we don't want to make it a mandate. So if everyone's okay with that, then we're moving down to new subsection I in that section, which is review and approval of the minutes.
I guess let me ask one question on that. It says study session shall not be a forum for public hearings. Nothing says we can't take public input. Is that accurate?
Actually, I think the idea in the study session that it wouldn't be public input, so.
It's not a public hearing. It doesn't mean that there can't be folks that are scheduled or invited, but it's not a public hearing with a roster requirement.
So public hearing is a legal term of art, and we would not be having hearings in that setting.
Well, right. And that part I don't have any issue with. Because we wouldn't be having any formal business. But
That's right.
I guess my question would be, do you insert a sentence that says, however, council may at its discretion
By public comment?
invite people to make comment as it sees fit?
You certainly could. I will tell you that the intent of that is, the intent of the norm of study sessions is the council to have a dialogue with the group or staff, depending upon who that is, and for you then, because you aren't taking any action, to then talk amongst yourself and then direct whatever the next step is. And so it's still in that, I would equate it to the, work product document that's not really ready for prime time, but it's your meeting. So if you want to allow yourself and create it, it's again, I think one of those that's more important to be, you need to think about the consistency of it. And if you start opening it up, you're basically moving in to that realm. So
The other side, though, is, there may, and we've heard this comment on more than one occasion, there may be people in the community who have a particular knowledge or expertise on a given topic that it would make sense, to potentially invite to provide input. Not saying they couldn't outside of the meeting or an email or some other form of communication, but I just throw it out there to see.
yeah, and if I may, I think that's where if there's a particular individual or a particular group, you probably want to invite them as part of the actual study session, so they're sitting at the table with you. The intent is that you're not, I'm walking, I don't mean to sound facetious, but I'm walking down the street, oh, look, council's having a meeting. I come in and want to pontificate on whatever you're talking about. So if you know who you're inviting, you are setting the stage, and that's why I keep saying it's not just staff. It could be a group that you're inviting to come.
Well, to play devil's advocate, there may be people we don't know about who, when you see the meeting and the topic, decide, hey, I can provide input. Understand the consistency issue is the one.
Yep, that's the tough part.
Someplace, and I'm sorry I can't remember where, I just recently saw this. We have in writing someplace that with council permission, someone can be asked to speak at a study session. And one reason that we did sometime in the past year, I think, ask someone to speak was the issue that we were having the study session on was driven initially by a particular member of the public. And so while we're sitting here trying to figure out how to address the problem, the issue arose that we wanted to make sure we knew what the problem the person was asking us to address was. So in that sense, that was a really important exception that we made. Somebody else remember that maybe, but anyway.
It's come up a couple of times where people, there's been an invitation to people sitting in the audience to make a comment. It doesn't happen frequently in my life.
Let's remove shall not.
Or we could add, because we won't do a public hearing, but we could add public input and comments will be approved in advance by council. It could be at the study
discretion.
Or at council's discretion.
Because it's some of that stuff will happen.
Okay.
Dynamic. Okay. Everybody good with that?
But if you leave it silent, can't you do that anyway? Because I keep thinking of a person who shows up here at one of our study sessions who's got vast knowledge of something we'll be talking about and hasn't made any prior arrangement, but the Bruces know that he's involved with that. And so one of them can say, I want to let Dan speak about this issue because Dan knows about it, and no advance notice has ever been given for it. And I think leaving it silent may give us more flexibility.
Or actually, this is probably another thing that we could put on the citizen website thing, that you can make comments or council can approve your comments or input in study sessions.
Bruce?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that one, Jim. I think this is one where, yeah, I agree, it doesn't preclude it if it's silent, but given that the topic I don't think exists anywhere else, I don't see a problem with putting it in here overtly to basically say it's doable if we so choose. I understand your point.
I'm not going to die on that sword either way.
I do want to make sure that we don't confuse the public by them beginning to think that a study session is a public forum like that, because we're often on pretty tight schedules. We've got 3 topics of discussion. We've got invited guests. They have presentations. And so, Jerry, did you help on that?
No, I think we have plans to.
There is a difference between public hearing and, on rare occasion, asking a member of the audience.
Right, I'm just concerned if we mention it in the document that it can be construed as such.
So we haven't committed one way or another if we don't mention it, right?
Right.
We're just not having public forums, which is this big.
Well,
I think that's more flexible.
let's do a show of hands for those who want to leave it silent. Okay. Which means we can do it, we just don't. Okay, great. And are we removing, the bottom, what are we removing on that?
Going back to I.
Yeah, or D. No formal action shall be taken in a study session shall not be a forum for public hearings. That whole part comes up?
No, I think that stays, because we, even.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Decided.
Okay. I wasn't reading the word not. Okay.
I think we're back to I.
Okay, no, we're on I. My readers, and they do not help with that stuff. Okay,
Yep, this change was just to reflect that you're not only reviewing minutes, but you're also approving them or amending them and approving them, and that we're doing all preceding meetings. Okay, everybody okay? Okay, so we've interchanged mayor with chair. I'm moving down, let's see,
Where are you now?
Page 6.
Which says,
all the way through.
The second to A on page 5.
So, under council proceedings, page 5, I don't have anything until
Well, I
we
do.
hit-
The mayor.
I do. The mayor, on A, roll call, the mayor of the council? No, just
Oh,
right.
mayor, that's right, okay.
Thank you.
And you want to do mayor pro tem? Yeah. Okay. And that same, I guess we'll have that same thing then in temporary chair.
B.
so come again, help me understand what we're doing on A.
We're taking out the phrase "of the council" in each of these items where it appears. Mayor of the council, we just take out "of the council."
So the mayor, or in its absence, Mayor Pro Tem.
I mean, that would have been president of the council, but I,
Okay. So the council in both places.
Just a nit item, since we're looking for these to also extend to boards and commissions where they have a chair and a vice chair, or a president and vice president, I'll leave it to staff to kind of figure out how do you make that extension. I don't want to necessarily,
And I think Kirsten's taken is, speak for, is not to put it in here, but have the statement in the boards and commissions document, right?
Well, and I also made the new reference in the very first page of the document, which says references to the mayor and the parliamentary rules are applicable to the presiding officer or chair.
all I was doing was talking about the vices and the,
It comes,
Bruce?
under C, it's got during the mayor or other presiding officer. I mean, I think that's a lot cleaner than to just replicate everywhere, because
Okay.
it captures
Yeah.
the whole thing once and done.
Okay, that's no problem.
Yes.
Okay, so, and so are we in subsection D now of council proceedings? That's page 6?
Yes.
Okay, so the one substantive change here is that we took out the last sentence. If a member transgresses the rules of council, the mayor or presiding officer now, shall call him or her to order, and we took out the clause that talks about being seated.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next section, members' duties and privileges. Here we reflected as the presiding officer. I think throughout we'll just go back to change everything to mayor
Mayor,
and presiding
presiding.
officer.
and when Teensy thing on A with the members and duties, the presiding officer, the strike through there takes out the comma, so make sure you keep a comma in there.
Okay. All right, subsection B.
Here's me.
Yes.
Why, would it doesn't seem to me that this thing loses a lot of flavor by basically just combining the members' duties and privileges section with the parliamentary rules, and just, instead of having a subsection.
Yeah, you're right. I agree. Does everybody else agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and what are you going to call it? Remember,
No, we're just going to put new subsections under parliamentary rules.
So-
Then in that section, I did talk to Kirsten about this from what I had proposed in members' duties and privileges. I would like to add, from what I proposed, an item, while considering the matters before them, council members shall confine themselves exclusively to the issues and avoid dealing with personalities or using disrespectful body language or facial expressions toward other council members, members of staff, or others present.
Bruce?
I think we're in danger of violating the rules concerning two open items, because I don't think we discharged the other one about sticking it under parliamentary.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Well, I was wondering, because if we do or do not add that, it may affect whether we keep it separate or not, but I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. I don't know that you had clear direction on what we wanted to do, although maybe I'm wrong.
So my understanding is on page 6, where it says members' duties and privileges, we're going to strike that heading and combine those two subsections, addressing the chair and debate under parliamentary rules.
That was the suggestion, yeah.
Okay,
Subject
and
to-
so then everybody has to agree.
Yeah.
That way.
Everyone's okay?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Now, Peggy, are you adding a
I'm going to
paragraph?
adding an item,
Okay.
and I did talk to Kirsten about it, and I understood her to say she thought it was a good one. But if you change your mind,
Okay, well, if you remind me what the changes, you're adding something from the old rules on,
no, from what I had proposed,
okay,
so you want me to read it again?
yes, go ahead.
Where in your document, Peggy?
It's under duties and privileges,
Page.
Which will
and
now
it's
be
item 8C, decorum and questions of order. And heaven help me, I didn't go back and look at the existing legislative rules, and that may be in there too. Too many documents were just
Bruce Stallman, Batman.
Isn't the requirement for the presiding officer to maintain decorum mentioned somewhere else? I'm trying to figure out where it was. Because that would fit,
Yes.
Peggy's emphasis would fit in that.
Yeah, council proceedings, paragraph D is decorum. If you want to,
Yep.
and the paragraph D that Kirsten just spoke to before we move down into this one, if a member transgresses the rules of council, the mayor shall call him or her to order. And Peggy, I may have missed it a little bit, but I wonder whether or not that's more of a protocol than it is within the legislative rule.
We have something
So maybe it's a
not
modification.
quite so specific in the protocol.
That's what I found.
If
Page 5.
it's a duty, it seems to me it's a duty for people to behave
That's
this way.
protocol.
So that's why I had put it in there.
Well, section C, page 12 of the protocol, the personal expectations section, says I treat fellow city officials, so forth and so on, with patience, courtesy, civility, and respect. I mean, we certainly can and should add council members.
Fellow city officials.
All right, fair enough, yeah, that's, okay, that's true, that's correct. So, I mean, I guess maybe it strikes, I don't disagree with it, but I think it seems like it's on the top, as opposed to like it's,
But you were in the protocols now.
that's correct,
Well,
yes.
and I'm talking about behavior in meetings, and when somebody is making a motion or discussing, and then you have what this is addressing, it seems to me it's related to that. So,
Well, these are protocol and standards of conduct. Let's just ask if council feels the protocol and standards of conduct cover the issue, raise your hand. 6.
I know the next revision is page 7. Under the parliamentary rules, we just loosened that language a little bit to make it clear that this is a guiding document, but it's not a rigid rule. And then the next thing I know that Councilmember Cole wanted to discuss was subsection B on discussion, and that we have in there the limitation of 10 minutes. I know that wasn't a proposed revision, but Councilmember Cole brought that up today as a more substantive thing that I think needed to be
Okay.
addressed by all of you.
so I think saying that generally discussion should be limited to 10 minutes is not wise. but it's covered, I think, by other things that say people not repeating things that have already been said and so forth. But I think a focus on the time is inappropriate. So I want to strike that second sentence.
Where are you?
Page 7,
7B.
Baker.
Second sentence.
Batman.
Parliamentary rules.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to state an intent to have a limit, because I think, as an observer, I've seen times where it has gone beyond what would have been a reasonable limit, but there didn't seem to be any motivation on council to stop itself. Just kept going. And
You
so-
must have been watching someone else.
No, it was this, and it was, and I could name a couple issues, but the extent of the conversation was beyond what the value of the discussion was. So it's a good idea to have an intent here, but the 10 minutes may be one that you can't keep.
But I still think if we already have said that in discussion, people shouldn't be repeating themselves or what somebody else has said, focus on the behavior, not the time. Focus on what it is that keeps the time short. And we do have that stated already.
I would just add that sometimes it's easier for the person running the group to be able to lean on a process and say, our process says it's time to limit the debate, rather than it is to zero in on the individual that is causing the problem.
But since you don't know how much important 2 or 3 other people might have to add, you don't know until they're talking. So the issue is more, even if it's tough, to focus on reining in repetition or irrelevant comments or whatever.
Bruce?
Is there anything, I thought at the state level, for example, a lot of times they'll say debate on a topic is scheduled for X amount of time. And I don't know, honestly don't know, but is there anything that couldn't say when we set the agenda, we say we expect the time for discussion on a particular item to be X, and then cause people to say, well, I've got other issues and I'd like to see that time extended if it's, if the majority of council feels that's appropriate. It may be overkill. It seems to me I've seen that when, down at the state level, for example.
Just in response to Bruce, there's a lot of, even at the council level, if you look at a lot of municipalities' agendas, it will list each item and a time that they anticipate. And it's more, I think it's less about, well, I guess it's probably a combination of managing themselves, but it's intended, I believe, more for the public to know, I'm only interested in this one that council anticipates they'll be there by 8:45. And then you guys use it for it, and half the time it's, blown because of whatever issue comes up. But it's not just a state level point. We easily do that because that directive of the council desire.
I don't have an issue with it. It's just generally is all it is. It just gives us an idea of what we may be going for. We can always extend it. We can always shorten it.
You could change, I'm sorry, Mayor, the shall, the should, if you want to, just to wordsmith a little bit.
I think for the reasons that Council Member Deckman stated, it is really useful for the person running the meeting so they don't have to single anyone out. And I do think we have enough wiggle room. We can change it to may, and then it's a guiding principle that generally may be used, and that allows you to extend it.
So
when
may
necessary.
instead of should?
Sure.
Sounds good.
May?
Let me make
Peggy?
2 comments then. We have in this room, more than in the other room, but sometimes in chambers too, we've taken almost the whole, the time we normally would meet, maybe 2 hours we spent on something that was allotted for 30 minutes, certainly an hour, hour and a half. We have people show up for meetings in study sessions that they were expecting us to get to them, and we got to them 2 hours later. So certainly and I don't think we were being repetitive or anything. It just the nature of the topic we were discussing. In terms of this, if we want to try to keep things short, then a different way to deal with it would be to focus on a statement perhaps saying, encouraging council to be as concise and efficient in what they're going to say, as opposed to thinking of limiting discussion.
Just to clarify, in my head, discussion is what council has before a vote. That if we've got presentations and we've got people coming down and we've got public hearing, none of that's discussion for me. Discussion is we have a motion on the table and we all weigh in. We've got a rule in here that says everybody you go around once, and then if somebody wants to be hit again, but everybody needs to speak, or at least be given an opportunity to speak before going around again. And to me, that's the discussion that stays at that 10-minute thing. And I don't have a problem with it being in there, because quite honestly, I think it should stay at a finite level. And it's kind of up to the discretion of the board. If somebody wants to call the question and end it, it's over. If someone really, really wants to say something else and we're nearing the end, it's kind of, call on them and say, okay, could you keep this under a minute? We're still. So part of it's how the mayor manages that. If it starts to seem to get a little long, I think having a limit in there at least gives people, okay, that stays under a certain amount of time. That doesn't go on forever. Bill?
I think you're right, Deb. When you look at what is discussion, it's typically what happens after the motion is made. And generally, you go to whoever made the motion first, is usually our practice in that. And, when we start to take a look at it, I don't think there's very often that we talk for 10-minute period after a motion is made. Right.
That's my other question, though, because it says discussion on agenda item may be held prior to a motion.
Well, you can do it either way. There's lots of organizations that have the discussion before you ever get to a motion. Doug always wanted to have a motion before he had discussion. Well, sometimes we found out that after the discussion, the motion needed to be changed.
Okay.
So having the ability to do the discussion first is sometimes very helpful. And I think as far as that second sentence, I'm kind of like Peggy, I'd just as soon see it go. But as long as you got wiggle room in there for a word that allows you to go beyond 10 or less than 10, whatever, I could live with it.
Okay. So we had discussed changing it to May?
May.
Or May? Is everybody okay with changing it to May?
Yes.
All right. And Kirsten?
Okay, so nothing in subsection C. Moving on to subsection D. Which the strike-through doesn't really accurately reflect where it starts, but it starts with the title second, and we took out the provision that prohibited the mayor from making a second.
Okay.
And your numbering's wrong there, off too.
Right. Well,
You were in K?
excuse me?
You were in K?
D.
Top of page 8.
Parliamentary rules, D.
Man, I was jumping way ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, Peggy's on K.
Okay, so I don't have anything again until vote, page 9.
Okay.
And what we did is clarify that the ayes and nays will be reflected on the vote board. And then Peggy she brought to my attention today that there'd be times where it would be recorded otherwise, so we'll make sure that's in there. For instance, if the vote board's not there, if we are recording it with the clerk.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
And I think charter says that the ayes and nays will be public, so however it is, whether it's Michael or somebody seeing who's raising their hand saying aye, or the mayor.
Well, and we've still got the mayor or any other member may request to show of hands at any time. I think it's the voice vote we're at. Is that or something?
Well,
Yes.
the issue is like when, even though we're not going to do stuff, formal stuff in study sessions, if we're doing consensus or whatever, if people are watching from home, they can't see who's raised their hands. So I think it's a matter of having that public.
So you're asking for the public, I'm sorry, just for clarification, so you're asking that it's a public,
Yeah, and let's say, suppose we still do have the workshop at the museum. There's no tote board there to show the ayes and the nays on things there. So,
these are parliamentary rules while you're in formal meeting. I think that's a separate discussion by the council to say how you want the level of minutes, if you will, that you want us to take on study sessions, which is probably a separate discussion, but because you're not in a parliamentary, Kirsten, they're not, they can generally follow them, but they're not taking formal action.
Right.
So-
And the provision in the charter talks about the ayes and nays, let's see, an affirmative vote of the, let's see, where am I? It doesn't say anything about that have to be public. I mean, we do that.
They recorded?
Yes, it has to be recorded.
Yeah,
in the
that's
journal
that's
of
what
the
I'm getting at.
council
You-
proceedings.
If you're
Which is
recording it, it's in some way that you've got to record it, so.
So we already do that?
It's covered by the charter.
Okay.
Also, certainly, when you're requesting for ayes or nays, shouldn't the mayor also be saying what the A is in support of the motion or opposed? Instead of just saying, give me your ayes and nays, shouldn't it be reflecting what it is you're voting on?
Well, we got some motion part, it's going to be the motion pieces ahead of that. But, yeah, you can put that in.
I think under Robert's rules, that's what you do,
Okay.
I would think.
You want to add that, that's fine.
So you want to say the mayor
Shall restate the motion.
shall call for a vote on the motion by requesting? Does that work?
Stating something to the effect that an A is in favor of the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, explain what a vote in favor of this means.
I don't want the Brucers just voting ayes and nays without knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's, we've got to keep an eye on both of them.
I'm a little worried.
So
Okay.
is everyone,
We're good on that?
yeah, okay.
Okay. We're on K, the new K.
So Councilmember Cernanik is asking about J.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I think that the only change in J is that we'll say the ayes are in support of the motion and the nays are opposed. Is that your understanding?
Is there a restatement? I mean, what I was hearing from Jerry was that there would be a restatement.
I
of
would
the
prefer a
motion-
restatement.
of
but
the
I
motion
didn't-
just prior to the vote being taken. That's what I was hearing.
So both changes, saying A's mean in favor of motion, and then also stating that the mayor will restate the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay, good catch. Okay. Let's see, subsection K. So we struck including immediately after a voice vote. The mayor or any other member may request a show of hands at any time. Does that look accurate to everybody? Okay. All right, and then moving on, subsection M, we struck frivolous or delaying motions.
You missed the part that said frivolous or delaying motions require a tarring and feathering.
Okay. All right, and then I have nothing until page 11, subsection Q, motions. no motion shall be entertained except, and again, my philosophy on these is they're yours, and if you don't like that, you can take it out. So we took that first section out on the limitation of certain motions.
I think that's good.
Okay. Then subsection O, motion to adjourn or recess. I had in there a motion to adjourn or recess is debatable only as to the time to which the meeting is adjourned or recessed. Again, trying in the interest of efficiency, but we took that out.
Okay.
And then subsection P, call for the question. And I think the idea here was that we'd only vote on one amendment at a time, so we took out the last sentence in that subsection. Okay, and then the next change I have is on page 13. We took out the sort of motions that we would say no debate. So we removed that limitation.
And in K, Q, I'm looking at the wording of Q. If a motion to postpone indefinitely is carried, the principal question shall be declared lost. I think I think I've gotten used to the main motion dies as opposed to the principal question is lost.
Okay, I think that's a good
If the rest of the folks
if everybody
are
agrees.
comfortable with that.
Is that okay? with
Everyone
everybody?
okay?
So read what you have changed then, please.
It'll say if a motion to postpone, so I'm sorry, page 12, subsection Q,
Right.
entitled motion to postpone indefinitely. If a motion to postpone indefinitely is carried, the main motion will die. Or maybe we should say will be, let's see, main motion will be declared dead by the mayor.
The main motion
Well,
dies.
see, I think when you start trying to figure out what you're going to say instead of declared lost, you get to running into problems.
The main motion dies works, I think.
Well, I mean, you don't have to say this exact word. So if a motion postponed indefinitely is carried, the main motion dies, and then the mayor would phrase that appropriately.
I think that's fine. Okay, so anybody?
Bruce,
Oh,
I just have a question because I'm not that familiar with this. Do these motions require seconds?
yes. That might be covered in the beginning, but that's where we
And
would,
it said,
Call the question doesn't require second, does it?
we have on page,
Depends.
Call the
it does.
question.
But it's an immediate.
I think call the question requires a vote.
Yeah, it's an
Not a second.
immediate.
Bruce?
then not a second?
No, it's, I don't think
Not on call question.
call the question's a vote, not a second. It can go without a second, but it needs a vote.
and on page 8, we say any motion requires a second or it dies for lack of a second.
But
So
we have some here that don't require a second.
I don't see anything in here. If it's specifically called out, then we would follow that. Robert's rules, again, we're just saying we can rely on it for persuasive authority, but we don't have to follow it. Am I answering your question?
Since we're using Robert's rules as a reference
Yes.
occasionally, could you check on the call the question? It seems to me that we have had that happen a couple times in the past few years, and there was no second involved. The very vote itself is what decides whether you...
But we...
Did Bruce get his answer?
Well,
Yeah.
Peggy's asking my question again.
Right.
Because I think there's a couple motions that don't require a second, but I'm not sure what they are by reading our rules.
Okay, well, if you look at motion to call the question on page 9, when seconded, the mayor, presiding officer, immediately calls the vote. So the way we have, I would encourage you to decide what you want to do versus what Robert's rules say. So right as it stands now, it requires a second. And if you want to revisit that, that's page 9, motion to call a question.
Could we defer to,
They've got it.
oops,
She's got a copy. But I think Kirsten's asking, what do you want?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking.
And just to clarify, I don't know what I want. I just want to make sure it says what we do.
and I think the more we don't follow what is kind of standard, the more confused boards and commissions will be. So, and since some of them
You know,
are very formal.
well, but they will have to follow these.
I know, but
Okay.
I'm just saying people have gotten into habits, and they have habits that they use elsewhere. So it seems to me if there's not a reason, we don't have a reason to disagree with Robert's rules on this. I mean,
So-
I just want to know what we
Right.
do.
Yeah, I think the problem is just having sat through a lot of the board meetings is not everybody knows Robert's rules. And so I think you really should decide what you think is best and put it in here and encourage the boards and commissions to follow those. And right now it's a second. I would like to see us get away from any reliance on Robert's rules if possible.
And so
Kirsten,
you-
sometimes I really have difficulty hearing you.
Okay,
You trail off at the end of your sentences.
okay, I will do a better job. The last thing I was saying is I would encourage us to get away from the reliance on Robert's rules and put it in this document and have our boards and commissions follow that, because Robert's rules, not everybody knows them, and they don't always get followed, and I don't want anything to be decided void just because we didn't follow a rule in that document, which is really made for the General Assembly.
Well, and I know that, but I know at least on the library board, man, they really, the chair of that has, ever since we said to use that, the chairs have followed that very carefully. They've been real proud of themselves. And I'm assuming that may also be true of some other boards and commissions. So if we change what they've gotten used to, even while we're also changing some other stuff for reasons that we think are valid, it just seems unnecessarily confusing.
Okay, Roberts does require a second and a two-thirds vote.
So we probably should, we want a majority or a simple?
Right now, as we have it written, we need a second and then a vote, and it says requires
So we just-
a majority.
And
There's a majority.
Robert says two-thirds. That's
Two-thirds on
part of it. Kirsten, I know you've said this before, but frankly, you know, I think the vast majority of the people on our boards and commissions have some familiarity with Robert's Rules of Order. And they're very easy to follow. And when you start going to great deviations by putting special rules in for how we want our boards and commissions to operate, I guess I have some problem with that. And this being a case in point, whenever we were putting in our rules that a majority is going to pass the rule, or pass whether you're going to call the question to end the debate, when Robert says you're going to take two-thirds, which is going to require one more person to side with you, I think is very important, because stopping debate on a motion, to me, is an important issue. I just am bothered by that.
But these are our rules. I mean, these aren't her putting them in. I mean,
I understand
it's,
that.
it's our rules. But you said her putting them in.
But the difference is to
So I'm just
stop.
being clear. These are our rules. These are not rules that they're coming down and telling us to go by.
That's right. But the issue with this particular question we're talking about is if a motion, if there is a call for the question and it's seconded,
Oh, I don't have an
and
issue
it
with that. I'm
goes
just
to
saying
4
what the comment
votes,
that you had
we'll
made, that's
stop
what
that.
I'm-
If you go back with Robert's rules, it takes 5 votes to stop the debate. And that's the issue that I'm dealing with, is
Robert rules are a guideline. I don't think we have to go by them by the T. It's a guideline.
I think part of the issue is a simple majority. Even in our case, it's only one difference if we have the full council there. A simple majority overruling continuing the discussion is, to me, maybe not as healthy, and I think that's what you're implying too, Jim, to allow the discussion to continue if you don't have two-thirds of people saying, let's stop the discussion.
Okay, council, we're, in the interest of time and what we've got scheduled up next, on this one, let's settle this one, and then we'll put everything on hold until we reconvene on this. So is the primary issue whether we want to do a 2/3 or a majority? Those in favor of doing a 2/3 vote on call the question, raise your hand. Okay, it's 2/3. Those opposed? 5-2.
That's on item number H.
Item number H, and then I think and then P is fine. Is everybody okay with item P? Okay, so when we return to this, we will start with S.
Actually, I just have one item. I just asked Kirsten to reconcile G and Q. Reconcile G and Q. G, which talks about a motion to table indefinitely, and Q, which talks about a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Okay.
I don't know what the distinction is, or if there is one.
Everybody okay with that?
We took Q out, didn't we?
And I
Well, the new Q
The new Q.
was the old T.
Jim?
oh, yeah,
was the
but I see the difference.
Okay, yeah.
That's a fine request.
Okay, all right, so we will take back up on S when we come back at 8 o'clock. And now we have Charles. So Charles, do we need to,
Can you give me 3 minutes preparation to walk around the room?
maybe we can get through,
We were so close.
I know, we were so close. Do you think we could do it in 3 minutes?
Yes.
Get through Z?
Not through it, I've got to come in with S, so take a little while.
Well, let's not waste 3 minutes. Okay, let's go to S. Oh,
Is this where you wanted the,
okay, Charlie's ready.
Councilmember Cole, is this where you wanted, instead of saying within 10 days, that the no later than next regular meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was something that I thought was a good idea when we were saying a motion to reconsider. It would be held, when it's postponed, it'll be held, rather than saying in 10 days, there's certain circumstances where it would need to go to the next meeting because we wouldn't be having one in 10 days. Does that make sense to everybody?
It's going to require some discussion. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. All right, that moves us to the discussion of the 2012 capital construction plan. Charlie?
Point of order.
Yes,
Use the new.
might as well
Show off.
Yeah, exactly.
practice our new rules.
I want to be reprimanded. Question, is this, so did we go out of a study session into a new study session, or did we go out of a special meeting into a study session, or was the whole thing one study session? Because
You're in a study session.
okay, so we didn't have to go out of it to do something that was on an agenda other than.
No, because there's no action. This is just a presentation and update from staff.
Appreciate the
Correct.
clarification.
And then after this, we'll go into a recess, and then come back out of the recess and go into a special meeting.
No, you'll actually,
Can we go out of the study session?
you'll stay, it'll be study session until 7:30. So in
Okay.
essence, so you're not taking, there's no action, it's all discussion from 3:45 until our state reps leave.
Okay. Charlie?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item could take 5 minutes or 5 hours. I prefer to lean towards the 5-minute approach.
32 minutes.
Before I begin, I would like to introduce to the council members, some of you may not recognize him, Steve Alexander, our street superintendent, Bob Deeds, our director of engineering utilities, and Dave Flagg, our landscape architect and city arborist. I had to bring my own support team, just in case there were some difficult questions. Before I go into the 2012 capital construction program, let me tell you, in 2011, we've completed everything but the following, and most of this should be done by the end of the year. The drainage work along the Nevada ditch, which is east and west of Federal Boulevard, is nearing completion. Much of the work to the east of Federal is complete. They'll be working on the section to the west of Federal Boulevard, weather permitting, which appears to be very good. We are also spending over $500,000 on the slip lining of the 66-inch interceptor sewer line. The work that is currently underway is in Sheridan. That work is proceeding, and they were hoping to be done by the end of this week. The company that got the low bid and is doing just fine is from Albuquerque, so they brought in a crew. They want to get done and get back to Albuquerque, obviously, before Christmas. There's also some other sanitary sewer work that is being done throughout the city in various locations. That work is being completed up in the next 10 days. And then we ran into a drainage problem on the south side of Mineral Avenue between Jackass Hill Road and Santa Fe Drive. It appears that we had groundwater that was coming up onto the sidewalk. That groundwater has been taken care of. It's now in an under drain that was blocked. That blockage has been removed, and we spent some money to take care of that. And as a result, we had ice on the sidewalk there. It no longer exists. Those projects are either 2011 projects. They're either done, or those that I described are underway, and we're making great progress to complete everything within 2011. The 2012 capital construction program, as shown to you in an outline form, includes $1.3 million in street rehabilitation. I will tell you we have a modification to the first item, and that's Jameson Avenue. We were expecting to do a complete reconstruction of that street from Broadway west to Kettle Avenue, which is there is a four-way stop there. It turns out that a complete reconstruction is economically unfeasible at this point, infeasible. It's the soils engineer that gave us a report on the conditions out there recommends that we do an extreme amount of work. We couldn't possibly afford what they're recommending for a reconstruction. We are going to recommend a change in that we do a roto-mill and overlay of the existing road. We believe that'll bring the price down quite a bit. It'll make the work go a lot faster. If we were to do a complete reconstruction at a cost of $2 million just to get to Kettle, it would last us about 20 years. That's what we designed it for, maybe longer. With what we're proposing to do as far as a roto-mill and overlay and a patch of some of the major fault areas will cost us significantly less. It will also possibly last us about 12, 15 years, maybe longer. And we're going to give that a try.
Charlie, can you take a question?
Yes.
On that section, recognizing that the previously South Suburban Service Center was there on the north side of Jameson, what's the status of that property? When might there be some construction, and how can we take that into consideration so that we don't fix the road and then it gets torn up with construction traffic?
Right. South Suburban has a contract to sell the property to Littleton Company. They are still considering, it's in due diligence. It would take a rezone application to build anything other than what South Suburban had typical of that site. That would take 6 months to a year to get through the City Council, Planning Commission. And then you have to realize the economy and whether or not they're ready to move on development of that in late 2012, sometime in 2013. There is already sewer and water to the site, plus other utilities. Hopefully they would not have to dig up the street in order to access those utilities. And by going with the approach that we're suggesting, they can still do the work. If they do have to tear up the street, They would have to replace it with an infrared patch if it's done within 3 years of our repairing the street. By going with a rotomill and overlay on Jameson, we can speed the work up dramatically. We can accomplish our goal with a lot less money. Then I'm showing you South Park Filing 4, north of Long Avenue. And I say C below because you'll also see later on for a moment that the in-house street division work includes this. We have a problem in the residential area. It's mostly single-family residential, north of Long, south of Mineral, between Long and Long. You say, where is he? I'm in that South Park Riders development. We have some extreme deterioration of streets that were built more than 20 years ago. Some of it we're going to try and repair with our own street crews with a rotomill and overlay, which is typical of what we do in residential areas. Steve and his crew can mill and overlay most residential streets. We're going to try and do it in this neighborhood. If the rotomill goes all the way through the asphalt to the dirt, then we got a problem. And we may have to save some of this money in the first part of street rehabilitation in case we have to hire a contractor to come in and do some extra work for us. That's why I'm showing this project at South Park Filing number 4 north of Long in street rehabilitation. And then if you look under street rotomill and overlay in the next section, we're including South Park Filing 4 in there as well. That's the last item. So in one section I say C below. If you go down one paragraph, I say C above. Yes, sir.
Well, let me ask, I've got some questions as well, but I guess would you prefer to go through, get through your presentation, or do you want to?
Let me do the street work first, and then I'll stop for questions at that point, Bruce, and then before I go on, because some of this I'm going to go through fairly rapidly.
That's fine.
The second section called street rotomill and overlay, this is city crew. Steve does this work. We have a budget of $260,000. We're showing the following streets there. Hinsdale Drive, and I'm doing this for people who might be watching on television that don't have the benefit of reading along. Stern Parkway from Detour to Windermere, Prentice from Prescott to Windermere, Crestline, Windermere to Forest Hill, the south side of Bellevue Avenue between Lowell and Federal, and then streets in South Park Filing number 4. As I mentioned earlier, we will try and do South Park Filing 4 streets with our own crew. If we have a problem, we will have to fill in with street rehabilitation contractor. And then on Bowles Avenue, we have $1.3 million. Excuse me. Yes.
Just a second. You and I have talked about the Hinsdale Drive and so forth.
Yes.
But that makes me think for the people who might be listening, these are what you project to do and the projected costs, but sometimes something you anticipate doing you don't get to. Could you comment so the people at home would understand that?
Good point. This is our plan. Sometimes plans don't always come about. If for some reason the cost of asphalt goes through the roof, we will not be able to do all of this. If the cost of asphalt has gone down, we might be able to do more. I'm putting Hinsdale Drive as the first bullet because it's the first one we're going to do. So if you're watching on television, you live on Hinsdale, Detour Circle, Cedar Circle, Gallup Court, or Hinsdale Court, we will be doing that street. We had planned to do it last year, and it didn't work for us. The plan this year is to start with Hinsdale and go down the list on the bullets as shown. Now I want to cover Bowles Avenue, and then I'll go back.
And you don't have to go into detail, but one reason you told me that you didn't get to the Hinsdale and those this year was a totally unexpected complication with another project. And that's why that was part of the reason you didn't get to it. So
Hinsdale is a major street for our street crews to do. It's a very long street, it's wide, it's going to take several days, weeks to accomplish that job. Is that fair, Steve? Yes. And Steve said yes. And we didn't have time or the resources in 2011 to finish that project and do it right. If we put it first on the list, we're going to go in and do the project.
Thank you for saying that.
Bowles Avenue, before I finish street work, you can see there that we have money that's from CDOT. We plan to make some improvements on the concrete work, sidewalk, curb and gutter in 2012, and do some landscape repairs as well, especially to the median islands in the street between Federal Boulevard and Platte Canyon Road. We're looking at doing some edge of roadway landscaping improvements and hardscape. Talked to David Flagg about that today, and we will be looking at some ways to do xeriscaping that will also allow us to do less maintenance out there. And then a rotomill and overlay of the section between Platte Canyon and Santa Fe in 2013 is our plan, and that would be done by contract crews. I'm going to stop there for a minute to address questions, because the Broadway project we actually can put off for a while, and because we just don't have a whole lot of staff to assign to do all this work. So if you have a question on street work, I'll stop at that point.
Couple of specific questions, but I pinged you on some of those this afternoon via email, and you can, at your leisure, shoot me a note back. But philosophically, staying at the 20,000-foot policy level, two major concerns. What you guys do, I have no issue with what you do. I mean, you guys have to make decisions, judgment calls on where you allocate scarce resources. I think you guys do a great job. The street guys are killer. These have always been top shelf. So thanks for terrific effort over the years. I guess the major concerns that I have is, I hear what you're saying about, for example, the rotomilling versus the rehab. And it sounds on the surface as if the decision to rotomill versus, to get 15-ish years instead of doing a full-blown rehab for some incremental amount of money less is probably economically justifiable and all in favor. But given the backlog of work that you guys have and the projects that are even on this list, at what level do we end up running around like the little Dutch boy with the fingers in the dike saying, I just don't have enough fingers left to fill all the holes? Is this something from your guys' perspective that from a white paper, I'll say it flat out, I think when we get to council goals and objectives, this is a worthy addition in terms of what do we really need, not what are you guys doing to stretch your dollars as far as you can stretch them. But given the condition of certain roads that, as I said, aren't even on your list yet, but I know for a fact are in pretty questionable condition, if we don't get to some of them for 4 or 5 years, people are going to have to buy Jeeps.
Yeah, it'd be cheaper to get everybody a Jeep than it would be to repave streets.
There you go.
Let me address some of those points real quick. There are streets that are not on this list that need to be done, and I will tell you, now's the time to write these down. Number one is sections of Broadway, especially between Fremont and Mineral Avenue. It's very severely rutted, and that needs to be either milled and overlay or rebuilt in some way. It's probably much more feasible to mill it and overlay. The question is, how long do we wait for the Marathon property to develop where they're going to tear up a section of Broadway, and they're also going to have to add sidewalk on the east side before we say, okay, we can't wait any longer. It's not a 2012 project. Bemis Street, south of Littleton Boulevard, is in terrible condition. If I had to list one street in town that is probably in need of work, it's Bemis Street, south of Littleton Boulevard. Elady Street, Cayley Avenue North. We have band-aided that together as best we can. I will tell you, Steve lives around the corner from there. He drives it regularly. Nod your head, Steve. You don't want his job at this time of the year when he's cutting ice. He's in a foul mood some days. It needs to be fixed. The cost to totally rebuild that street is extremely high, could reach $1 million. Question is, do we spend $1 million there where there is not as much traffic as there is on Jameson Avenue?
Kaylee to where?
Kaylee, probably north to at least Shepherd, if not to Littleton Boulevard. Aberdeen Avenue, Aberdeen Street as well, from Arbor Avenue all the way around to Aladdy Street and actually to Lakeview. I'm sure you would. Just to show you I don't give favoritism in this job.
What's that?
I have a Jeep.
Oh, there you go. Fair enough.
I'm going to put it to you bluntly. The streets in Aberdeen Village all need to be redone. Lakeview, Longview, Park Hill, Lake Avenue. I just named every street in the neighborhood. Those need to be rebuilt. What's interesting is they're not literally dissolving, meaning that the underlying road base is probably pretty good. Also, to point out to you, those streets were originally constructed in the 50s, and they probably haven't been totally reconstructed ever since.
There was an overlay put on at one point, but keep going.
They're solid.
Yeah.
The streets in South Park Filing 4, they all need to be redone.
But I mean, and this is sort of the point, Charlie, is does it make better long-term economic sense to do a road reconstruction for the incremental money that's going to last 40, 50 years, theoretically? Or to just keep roto-milling and overlaying because, yeah, it smooths them out for 10
I'm
years.
going to speak for Bob Dietz in a moment because he says that we construct our streets to last for 20 years.
Okay.
And then we have to do maintenance on top of that to let them last 30 years and 40 years. Saying that right?
That's correct.
I also have an obligation to get the biggest bang for the buck. So where can I spend the money where the most traffic is going to benefit from improvements to the road system? And we did that in 2011. The intersection of Broadway Mineral, Broadway Littleton Boulevard, Platte Canyon and Bowles. We got a huge bang for our buck. Significant improvements for a large amount of traffic. When we go turn to Jameson, we don't have a large amount, but we have a lot of traffic on Jameson that serves the Southbridge neighborhood. There's only a couple of ways to get into Southbridge, and if you're on Broadway, there's only one, and that's at Jameson Avenue where the covered bridge is. We need to take care of that street, or in some time there won't be much left for those people to drive on. My intent is, again, to get the biggest bang for the buck. By going from a complete reconstruction on Jameson to a significant roto-mill and overlay, we're going to see 15, maybe 20 years of life for less money than we would with a reconstruction that might last, we would hope, 30 years. And we think that's a smarter way to go. That gives us some money to possibly go in and do South Park Filing 4 if we need to. Now here, with at least two people in the room, I'm not going to make great friends. South Park Filing 4 is worse than Aberdeen Village. Unfortunately, none of you live in South Park.
I want to just be clear. We're sort of, I like to say, pulling your area.
I know what you're doing.
But for people who are listening on television, I mean, the issue has nothing to do with a specific neighborhood. It has to do with which are
It does.
the worst streets that need the most attention from a priority standpoint sooner than later. And that's where you guys do focus your attention. That's where you should focus
Yes.
your attention. Totally understand.
Filing 4 is where?
Pardon?
Filing 4.
Yeah.
Where's the location of it?
It's, go west on Mineral Avenue, past the Highline Canal, make your second left turn at Long Avenue. Long is a loop street that starts at Mineral and ends at Mineral. And it ends at where the Jackass Hill Mineral intersection is.
That whole section?
Yes, much of those streets. This is where Steve Alexander earns his pay. Can he go in there and mill that street and still come out with a good solid road that we might be able to get 12, 15, maybe even 20 years of work on? I will tell you right now, we have an incredibly great street crew. They're going to give it their best shot. If not, we'll save some money to go into filing for it from the contract work. Otherwise, we'll have some money left over to do something.
When was filing 4 put in?
1981,
So that's relatively new.
30 years.
We're expecting 20. Is that what I heard?
When we build a street from scratch, we would like to get at least 20 years out of it. Typically, we get a lot more.
Whereas Aberdeen Village is 50 years old and it's still hanging in there. What is the big difference?
The soil conditions underneath. Now, here's where I put on a different cap, and I'll speak for Bob. If you live north of Ridge Road, you have very good soil conditions under the streets. If you live south of Ridge Road, you have a different soil condition. You have expandable dirt underneath the roads south of Ridge. North of Ridge, it's sandy, gravelly conditions.
Correct.
I have to get my cheering squad to support me on occasion.
Bob happened to say correct.
Yes. So the conditions for street long cycle is better north of Ridge Road. Some of those streets have been there 50, 60 years with hardly anything done to them. That's pretty good. You say, oh my gosh, what did we do? We didn't do anything. The soil conditions are really solid. South of Ridge Road, we're seeing deterioration. We're seeing asphalt cracking much more than we see north of Ridge Road. I can give you many examples, including the street I live on, where the cracks in the road are widening, and part of it has to do with the soil conditions. What's really encouraging is the concrete is not deteriorating, just the asphalt. That helps us tremendously.
Sidewalks?
Yes. Let me go to the Broadway rehabilitation. I know you have a commitment later, and I want to get through this. That's a 2013 project. I won't go through the details. Concrete replacement. I'm going to pass out. Could you pass those around, please? The city program is our 50-50 cost sharing, where we do residential properties primarily, where the property owner pays half the cost. In reality, they pay a lot less. This is the brochure we use when we do the concrete replacement program. It explains this. It is extraordinarily popular. We do not promote it. We do not advertise it. It's done by word of mouth. We're already booked up entirely for 2012. We stopped taking reservations for this so that we don't have anybody waiting for a 2013 concrete project, because I would like to consider a change in this program from 2012 to 2013 that I would like to discuss with council later in 2013. Now's not the time to do it.
Later in 2012.
2012, I'm sorry, yes. Again, on the second bullet, we have $100,000 to do contract work. Much of this is on the streets that Steve is going to be working on. When we repave a street with rotomill and overlay, we replace the concrete at no cost to the resident. We have $50,000 for repair work on Mineral Avenue between Santa Fe and Platte Canyon Road. And we have our 2013, it will be Community Development Block Grant Program, the $127,005. David Flagg is our manager of our Community Development Block Grant. That is mostly in work in North Littleton, and I'll say north is in the area of Windermere and Prentice is a good place to show. We're doing the 2012 program right now.
But Charlie, you should also have something in there about 2012 Community Development Block Grant Funds, because this is the 2012 capital construction program.
Yes.
So that 2013 maybe should be 2012?
Well, the 2012 program actually starts in late 2011 and goes into 2012. The 2013 program starts in 2012 and goes into 2013. It's the federal government fiscal year, not our fiscal year.
Okay.
Under storm drainage, we have $300,000. Now, for those of you who got out your calculators and started adding, I got projects here that cost more than $300,000. We need to do the engineering and some construction of Littles Creek, which is Stern Ditch, from Windermere to Lake. Possibly replacing one street crossing. We'll try and do as much work as we can. That is managed by Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. Yes, sir.
That's what I wanted to ask was, the $300,000 is our budget, but these costs, if they're total costs, how much of that is Is that this 200,000 UD FCD?
Yeah, you'll see a split. You went, the FCD is urban drainage.
Yeah, right.
Future work in 2013 and 2014 would finish up Stern Ditch, as most people call it. The second bullet on the next page is Jackass Gulch. This is in the Palisade neighborhood, which is on the north side of Mineral, east of Jackass Hill Road. Jackass Gulch goes right through their backyard. We have an easement for the gulch. Urban Drainage has indicated they will work on this project. We'll put $25,000 into engineering in 2012, and you can see the next bullet would mean construction in 2013-14, and that $200,000 is our share of the cost, plus matched by Urban Drainage. And then on a repair maintenance project, Lee Gulch erosion, this is by the high school tennis courts. The trail is on the east side of the tennis courts. If you walk along there, you'll see erosion of the ditch. If we don't do something, there might not be a ditch there. So we're suggesting that we spend the money to take care of that project. That's actually paid for 100% by Urban Drainage. We don't have to put a dime into it. They manage it, and they hire their contractors to do that.
To do something similar to the canal where it came down behind the YMCA.
Exactly, just like that. Other projects that we will take on, if some council members will recall this, we have a petition from the people of South Ridge Way to pave their street. We have to do the drainage work first. So I'm proposing that we spend $35,000 there. Three Lakes Tributary, here's why I ask you the question. Who knows where that is? Coventry. Yeah, thank you. Coventry, there is a pond there that actually is in an easement. It's a public easement, and we can take care of the drainage work there for $50,000. They have a serious drainage problem of the Three Lakes tributary that comes over the small pond they have. And then Stern Lake dredging. You're well familiar with this problem. Originally, we said it was $50,000 to us, $50,000 to Urban Drainage, and $50,000 to South Suburban. Urban Drainage said no. However, they said if each agency, Littleton and South Suburban, puts in $75,000, they will manage the work. I will tell you that is big. Question I have to address the council. Are you willing to increase the amount that's in the budget from $50,000 to $75,000 to match against South Suburban to have Urban Drainage do this work? If there is a consensus of that tonight, I can move forward and get an agreement with Urban Drainage presented to you sometime between now and the end of the winter in 2013. If we don't, that lake won't be touched. We do have the money. Now, if you know, well, why do we have the money if he's saying we got $300,000, but we have more than that here? Because we have money in reserve that will have to be appropriated in order to spend it. And we're suggesting, council, that you do designate $75,000 from the Storm Drainage Fund to take care of that lake. South Suburban has said that they will do the same thing. They're addressing it to their board tomorrow night.
And I'm sorry, and council, just for clarity, that's why we removed this off, because it would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, it'd be the approval of the IGA.
That's correct.
That we'd ask, actually would be the formal action putting this into place. So that's why we removed the consent agenda item A this evening.
So can I ask for consensus, informal, to proceed and then put it on our next regular meeting to...
If you ask for consensus and get it, I will actually not bring it back to you until I get that intergovernmental agreement that Michael mentioned, which might be in February or March before I actually get a final version to present to council.
So there's no urgency on doing anything on this tonight?
Not on a formal item, but if there is a consensus you do not want to spend the 75, then I have a problem. Then we would
Can you bring back a little bit more information on it
I could do
at
that.
the next meeting, and we would not lose any? Because I just don't. I think we've lost a partner. We need more money. There's the urban drainage management thing that's new.
If you wish me to do it that way, I can bring it back for a meeting like the January 3rd meeting.
Is everybody okay with that? Get a little bit more.
I Agree. I'd like to know where the money's coming from, what's the impact on where the money is coming from. I think my recollection is we put the $50,000, it's in the 2012 budget, we're now asking for more.
Right.
What's the impact?
Okay, I'll give you more detail on that and present it as a formal item to City Council.
In the meantime, is council comfortable with us moving forward, working with them on the IGA? So we don't, okay, okay.
For those of
Just
us who are
concurrently.
familiar with that.
I'm going to go through the rest of these fairly quick.
Yeah, we've got,
Right. Sanitary sewer is not very pretty, but it's listed here. Traffic improvements, we want to work with Douglas County on some improvements at Broadway and County Line Road. I've given you the bullets. Bridge repairs at Prince Street over the river. We do have money for the Littleton Center irrigation system from Denver Water. We're moving ahead with that project. You previously signed an agreement with Denver Water to move ahead on that. The open space program I've shown there as well, and some other projects. I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions. I'll be glad to address them. If you want to email me a question, I'll address that as well. This is a lot of work. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of work. You get a lot of improvements in 2012 with what we're showing here.
Assuming everything goes according to plan, is this list of everything highly achievable, reasonably achievable, possibly achievable?
Can you go down one more? No.
Sure.
It is in between likely and reasonably achievable.
Okay.
Yes. This is, realizing without adding staff, this is a lot of work. But what's cool about this is council, you're going to see a lot of activity, construction, and good maintenance work all over the city. We've covered every area we possibly could with all this work.
Jim?
The Dad Clark, the northbound Santa Fe over Dad Clark Gulch has been approved through Dr. Cog, and so the money is going to be flowing to do that project. The C-470 Coalition project, Charlie and I need to do a presentation and a study session to council sometime before too long, because we're going to be asked to make some commitments soon, and we need to get this before council.
I will tell you, under the open space program, the first bullet, we did run into some issues on the Hudson Gardens money that's allocated by council to those two projects. We have to come back to you, because Michael and I met with the open space manager of Arapahoe County, and we have some issues we have to work through before that project can even come close to moving forward. That one, there is some issue with it, pretty significant.
What timeline?
I would say it's going to be a couple of months before we can bring it back to council.
Does anybody else have any questions for Charlie? Jerry?
I do. Is there any discussion at all on Broadway between, I guess it would be Broadmoor to Euclid on the west side?
Yeah, that would be one of those projects that we would like to do, but we don't have any money to do.
But we don't have money to do a lot of these projects.
I would tell you that project also involves quite a bit of concrete work, because that sidewalk between Broadmoor and Cayley, it feels like it's only about 3 feet wide, and it should be at least 6. And so we would have to do some concrete work and a lot of street work over there.
Can you use any block grant money over there?
David is shaking his head no, because it doesn't qualify within the census tracts that block grant qualifies in.
Also, the street is too busy. We have to do a much bigger picture, and as far as I know, I can check, I'm pretty sure.
David said he would check, but it's $127,500 for block grant. That wouldn't get very far on Broadway.
One of the things I'd like to see, whether there's funding for it or not, is I'd like to just see a plan. What would it take just to, I don't know, to beautify that a little bit, with whether it be vegetation, with David or something like that. Just something to improve it, to also help out those homeowners over there. Because when you go over there, there's vacancy after vacancy now. It's just it's not good. I would like to see a plan of some sort. What could happen there?
If council wishes, we can prepare a plan that shows how that could be done. But again, the sidewalk is a major focus of that street, right there. It happens to be a detached sidewalk on that side of the street, whereas you go on the other side, it's attached, because it's commercial development. Again, council, if you want to call or email me a question on any specific item in here to give you more explanation, that's fine, and we'll bring back the Stern Lake dredging to you on January 3rd.
Yeah, just one,
Jim, sorry.
Well,
Jim's first.
go ahead and get Phil, and then I'll come
Okay.
back. to something
mine
else.
mine was real quick. As you're looking at Jameson and some of that traffic, while that construction is occurring, may end up going toward Windermere and dumping onto Mineral. That north part of that intersection at Mineral and Windermere
Yes.
is pretty rough right now. And
Understood.
so take a look at that one.
Steve heard you.
Okay.
Jim?
I'd like to propose that we consider an item on our workshop agenda to look at long-term street rehab and how we're going to financially solve that problem.
Any objections? Okay. Charlie, a couple questions. One on your street rehab. Obviously, if you're not going to do the Jameson on rehab, that 1.3 changes.
Yeah, the amount, no, the budget is 1.3.
Okay.
We would see how much we're going to spend on Jameson, how much work needs to be done, and then the leftover money we may have to put in South Park Fighting For, or we may come back to you and said, you know, we just have $500,000 we don't have an allocation for, and we'll take another street.
But if you're not going to do, what I understood you to say is that it's not feasible to do what you want to do, so you will do a rotomill and overlay?
Yes.
Is that's part of that budget, that rotomill and overlay will
Yes.
be $900 to $1 million?
Probably, we hope it'll be less than that,
Okay.
but I don't know the answer to that question there.
Okay, and then on the Broadway rehabilitation?
Yes.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. That's not the one. On Bowles Avenue, the asphalt rotomill and overlay in 2013, is that budgeted in 2012?
The concrete work would be done in 2012, and we would do, and the landscaping work, and we would do the actual asphalt work in 2013.
So the 1.3 is...
It carries over from year to year. That's the
Okay.
CDOT money we got
Right.
from taking over Bowles Avenue,
And I thought that was
1.3 million.
It was 1.3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, CDOT gave us a total of 1.8 million between those two projects, Broadway and Bowles Avenue.
Okay.
And that money is sitting in a separate account from everything else.
Does anybody have any more questions on this? Jerry's concern, I mean, perhaps this is something that comes back. You want to have those streets looked at, or a
That
plan?
one section there on the west side, Charlie's very familiar with this.
Can you bring a plan back
Yes.
in January on something like that? That would integrate landscape?
We'll, I don't want to commit to January, but we'll bring
Okay.
you a plan back as soon as we can get it.
Okay.
But a plan, it's sometime in the
Yeah.
future.
Between our engineers and David, we'll try and put something together that gives you an idea of what we could do there in order to make that look better, better sidewalks, curb gutter, and whatever else needs to be done.
Okay. Mike?
And I would just add on to Councilman Taylor's comment, when you get the proposed goals and objectives, you will see some long-range plan components around asset management, dealing with all of our facilities, of which obviously streets are a major component of it, and how you fund that obviously would be part of that. So assuming that that comes in, I think part of, making sure that Public Services has a street repair and replacement program set in place so that you are all clear on how we make those decisions. We are thinking about when does roof need to be replaced, so we're already starting that process. We'll put that in front of you as well to make sure that you're comfortable with setting up essentially an overall asset management program, looking at all the existing public assets that we have, and are we retaining them and maintaining them at a level that is worthy of the investment that we made with the public dollars. So we're going to have a lot of conversation is the point of that statement.
Well, good, because I'll keep bringing it up.
Do.
Okay, unless there's any more discussion, we'll recess until 7:30. Well, until 6. right?
Seven.
Because we're,
Until 7:30. Oh, yeah.
Until dinner.
okay, so we'll recess until 7:30. All right.